Love was never sweet. It was poison wearing perfume.
Valentine's Day morning arrived in Washington, D.C. like a hangover wearing a tuxedo, dressed up, but fundamentally unpleasant. I sat in my cramped FBI field office cubicle, staring at spreadsheets that made about as much sense as my marriage. At 42, I'd mastered the art of forensic accounting, but remained utterly baffled by the economics of love. My name is Ethan Cole, and I've spent the last 15 years following paper trails that lead to white-collar criminals. Ironic, considering I was about to discover the biggest fraud of all was sleeping in my bed every night. "Morning, sunshine," Maya Tran called from the adjacent cubicle. At 34, she was the FBI's best tech analyst and the closest thing I had to a real friend in this bureaucratic wasteland. "You look like someone stole your lunch money." Disregalimentos. "Just contemplating the mysteries of matrimony," I replied, adjusting my reading glasses. "Did you know that the average American marriage lasts 8.2 years? Rachel and I are at 15. We're either statistical anomalies or gluttons for punishment." Marijuana laughed, her black hair catching the fluorescent light. "Always the optimist. What's Rachel doing for Valentine's Day?" Expelled. Before I could answer, the elevator dinged, and a delivery guy emerged carrying the most elaborate floral arrangement I'd ever seen. White flowers cascaded from an enormous crystal vase, elegant and pristine. "Ethan Cole?" the delivery guy asked. Every head in the office turned. In 15 years of marriage, Rachel had never sent flowers to my workplace. Honestly, she'd never sent flowers anywhere. My wife was about as romantic as a tax audit. "That's me," I said, signing for the arrangement. The card read, "To my darling husband. These beautiful oleanders remind me of our pure love. Happy Valentine's Day. Forever yours, Rachel." Misinformation. "Holy crap, Ethan!" called out Jim Patterson from across the room. "Your wife must really love you." "Either that or she's having an affair and feels guilty," I muttered, but loud enough for Maya to hear. Maya approached the flowers, her expression shifting from amusement to concern. She'd been a medical student before joining the FBI, and something about her sudden tension made my stomach clench. "Ethan," she said quietly, "you need to throw these out. Now." "What? Why?" "Oleanders are toxic, extremely toxic. Every part of the plant contains cardiac glycosides that can cause—" She didn't finish the sentence because I was already stumbling toward the men's room, my mouth filling with saliva and my vision blurring. The last thing I remembered was Maya shouting for someone to call emergency. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and Maya's worried face hovering over mine. At George Washington University Hospital, doctors pumped my stomach and ran blood tests while I drifted in and out of consciousness. "Mr. Cole?" A young doctor with kind eyes stood beside my bed. "I'm Dr. Martinez. You've been poisoned with oleander toxin. Fortunately, we caught it early. Another hour or two, and we'd be having a very different conversation." Maya sat in the corner, her laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Ethan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully. Has Rachel been acting differently lately?" Thrust my medicated haze, fragments of memory surfaced. Rachel working late more often. New clothes, a different perfume. Phone calls she took in the other room. "She's been distant," I admitted. "But I figured it was work stress. She's been traveling a lot for pharmaceutical conferences." Griffith's expression darkened. "I've been doing some digging while you were unconscious. Rachel's been deleting text messages, but nothing's ever really gone if you know where to look." She turned her laptop screen toward me. Even through my blurred vision, the messages were clear. Rachel to Daniel Pierce. "He'll be gone soon. The insurance money is ours." Daniel to Rachel. "Are you sure about this? What if someone suspects?" Rachel to Daniel. "Who's going to suspect? He's a boring accountant who probably ate bad sushi. Besides, I've been setting this up for months. The life insurance policy is airtight." The room spun, and not from the medication. My wife of 15 years, The mother of my 10-year-old daughter, Ava, had tried to end me, and she wasn't working alone. Daniel Pierce. I knew that name. He was Rachel's boss at Meridian Pharmaceuticals, a smooth-talking executive with perfect teeth and a gym membership he actually used. I'd met him at company parties, where he'd made jokes about boring government work, while eyeing my wife like a predator sizing up prey. There's more, Maya said gently. She showed me another exchange. Daniel to Rachel. I can't wait to have you all to myself. No more pretending to care about his pathetic stories. Rachel to Daniel. The best part is, everyone will think I'm the grieving widow. Poor Rachel, losing her devoted husband so suddenly. I closed my eyes, trying to process the magnitude of betrayal. 15 years of marriage, and I'd been nothing more than a life insurance policy with legs. How long have they been planning this? I asked. Based on the message history, at least 6 months. Rachel's been researching oleander toxicity, insurance claim procedures, and even grief counseling services to make her performance more convincing. A nurse entered to check my vitals, and Maya quickly closed the laptop. After she left, I grabbed Maya's hand. I need you to do something for me, I said. Don't tell anyone what you found. Not yet. Ethan, we have to report this. Rachel tried to homicide you. Hishonamas. And she'll claim it was an accident, that she didn't know oleanders were poisonous. Her defense attorney will paint her as a loving wife who made an innocent mistake. I struggled to sit up, my mind clearing despite the medication. But if we're smart about this, we can do something better than sending her to prison. What do you mean? We can destroy her completely. I was released from the hospital with strict instructions to rest and avoid stress. If the doctors only knew that stress was about to become my full-time occupation. I'd called in sick to work, telling my boss I needed time to recover from food poisoning. Rachel played the concerned wife perfectly, bringing me soup and fluffing my pillows, while probably calculating how much longer she'd have to maintain the charade. I'm so sorry about the flowers, she said, sitting on the edge of our bed. Even after 15 years, Rachel was stunning. Blonde hair that caught light like spun gold, green eyes that had once made me forget my own name. Now, those same eyes looked at me with barely concealed impatience. I had no idea oleanders were dangerous. The florist said they were exotic and beautiful. It's okay, I replied, studying her face. Accidents happen. But I knew it was no accident. Maya had traced the flower order to a specialty shop, where Rachel had specifically requested oleanders, asking detailed questions about their toxicity, for a mystery novel she was writing. That evening, while Rachel showered, I called Maya from the garage. How are you feeling? She asked. Like a dead man walking, which coincidentally might work in our favor. I kept my voice low. I need you to introduce me to your hacker friend, the one you mentioned who helps with cyber crimes. Silas? Ethan, he's not exactly FBI material. Ex-con, lives off the grid, trusts nobody except me. Perfect. Can you set up a meeting? 2 hours later, I sat up and including our supporting the story with 35 million times. 2 hours later, I sat up into a 35 million times. 2 hours later, I sat up a constantly to a 4th million times. 2 hours later, I sat up and properly look at it to a 5 million times. 2 hours later, I sat up a constantly to a 4th million times. 2 hours later, I sat up a constantly to a 4th million times. 2 hours later, I sat up a constantly to a 4th million times. 2 hours later, I sat up a meeting with him. 2 hours later, I sat up a constantly to a 4th million times. 2 hours later, I sat up a constantly to a 4th million times. Whenever hours later, I sat in Maya's cramped apartment while she video called a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a cyberpunk novel. Silas Rourke had wild gray hair, multiple piercings, and eyes that seemed to see through computer screens into people's souls. So you're the dead guy walking, Silas said, his voice crackling through the speakers. Maya told me your wife tried to poison you with flowers. That's some next-level passive-aggressive crap right there. Can you help us recover more deleted messages? I asked. Brother, I can recover messages from phones that have been through a wood chipper. But this is going to cost you, and I don't mean money. Once we open this door, you can't close it. You sure you want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes? I thought about Rachel's performance at the hospital, her crocodile tears and concerned wife act. I'm sure. What Silas found over the next few hours made my stomach turn. Rachel and Daniel's affair had been going on for 8 months, and their messages revealed a level of contempt for me that was breathtaking. Rachel to Daniel. He actually thinks I find his dad jokes funny. The man has the romantic appeal of a tax form. Daniel to Rachel. At least you won't have to fake it much longer. Though, I have to admire your acting skills. You should get an Oscar for Devoted Wife. Rachel to Daniel. The hardest part is not laughing when he talks about our retirement plans. As if I'd spend my golden years watching him organize his stamp collection. But the worst messages were about our daughter. Daniel to Rachel. What about the kid? Rachel to Daniel. Ava will be fine. Kids are resilient. Besides, she'll be better off without his boring influence. You'll be a much better father figure. To Rachel. I'm not really the stepfather type. Rachel to Daniel. Don't worry. We'll send her to boarding school. More time for us. I had to step outside Maya's apartment to keep from putting my fist through her wall. They weren't just planning to end me. They were planning to discard my daughter like an inconvenient accessory. There's more, Silas said when I returned. They tried to hire someone to make it look like an accident. A guy named Tommy Greco. But he backed out when he learned you were FBI. Do you have records of that? Shimmer hots, audio files, the works. Your wife is many things, but smart isn't one of them. She kept digital records of everything. Maya leaned forward. Ethan, this is enough evidence to put them both away for attempted homicide and conspiracy. No, I said firmly. Prison is too easy. They'd be out in a few years with good behavior, and Rachel would still get sympathy as the widow who was led astray by her manipulative boss. I want something more permanent. What do you have in mind? I smiled for the first time in days. I'm going to give them exactly what they want. They want me dead? Fine. I'll be dead. But I'm going to make sure they don't enjoy it. Relinquished the next week, I began laying the groundwork for my own death. Maya helped me research cardiac episodes that could be triggered by oleander poisoning. Silas provided fake medical records showing a history of heart problems that I'd supposedly hidden from Rachel. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. I would fake a heart attack. Maya would ensure the paramedics who responded were ones she trusted, and a sympathetic doctor at the hospital would pronounce me dead. My body would be cremated immediately due to infectious complications, with Maya handling the arrangements. Meanwhile, I monitored Rachel and Daniel through the surveillance equipment Silas helped me install in our house. Watching my wife's reaction to my supposed death would be the first installment of her punishment. But before I could die, I needed to gather more evidence. I needed to catch them in the act of celebrating my demise. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Rachel announced she was going out with her girlfriends from work, the same women who'd been covering for her affair and helping her plan my homicide. I followed them to Chez Laurent, an upscale restaurant in Georgetown where Rachel and her friends met monthly to gossip and drink overpriced wine. Using a listening device Maya had procured from FBI evidence storage, I positioned myself at the bar and tuned in to their conversation. "So how's married life treating you, Rachel?" asked Jennifer Walsh, Rachel's closest friend and confidant. "Oh, you know how it is," Rachel replied with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Ethan's been under the weather lately. Food poisoning or something." "Poor thing," said another friend, Susan Chen. "Though between you and me, I don't know how you stand it. The man has all the excitement of watching paint dry." Rachel's laugh grew sharper. "You have no idea. Do you know what he did for our last anniversary? He organized our tax receipts and called it romantic preparation for our financial future." Themselves erupted in laughter, and I felt my jaw clench. "At least Daniel knows how to treat a woman," Jennifer said with a knowing smile. "Speaking of which, how are things progressing with your situation?" Rachel glanced around the restaurant before leaning in conspiratorially. "Let's just say my problems might be solving themselves soon. Ethan's been having some health issues, and his life insurance policy is very generous." "Rachel," Susan gasped, but she was smiling. "You're terrible." I'm practical, Rachel corrected. Life's too short to spend it pretending to be happy with someone who thinks excitement is a new spreadsheet program. I'd heard enough. As I left the restaurant, I realized that destroying Rachel wouldn't be enough. Her friends were complicit in my attempted homicide, covering for her affair and encouraging her homicidal plans. They all deserved to face consequences. But first, I had to die. The next morning, I put my plan into motion. I called in sick to work again, complaining of chest pains and shortness of breath, classic symptoms of cardiac distress that could be attributed to delayed effects of oleander poisoning. Rachel was at work, probably planning my funeral with Daniel, so I had the house to myself. Maya arrived at noon with Dr. Sarah Kim, a cardiologist who owed Maya a favor from a previous case. This is highly irregular, Dr. Kim said as she examined the fake medical records Silas had created, and probably illegal. A woman tried to homicide my friend with poisonous flowers, Maya replied. I'd say we're past worrying about irregularities. Hamilton Kim sighed. Fine, but if this goes wrong, I never met either of you. At 2:30 p.m., I called Rachel at work, gasping into the phone. Something's wrong, I wheezed. My chest. I can't breathe. Oh my God, Ethan. I'm calling emergency. No, I said weakly. Just come home, please. Alex, I could practically hear her calculating in her head. If I died at home without medical intervention, it would look more natural, less chance of an autopsy revealing the oleander poisoning. I'll be right there, she said, and I could hear the excitement she was trying to hide. 15 minutes later, Rachel burst through our front door to find me collapsed on the kitchen floor, clutching my chest. Dr. Kim was already there, having entered through the back door, and was performing CPR. What happened? Rachel cried, and I had to admit her acting was impressive. Cardiac arrest, Dr. Kim said grimly, probably triggered by the toxins from those flowers. His heart couldn't handle the stress. Rachel knelt beside me, tears streaming down her face. Ethan, stay with me. Don't leave me. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have been moved by her performance. Instead, I lay still and let my breathing become shallower. Call emergency, Dr. Kim ordered. The paramedics who arrived were Maya's contacts, briefed on the situation. They performed an elaborate show of trying to revive me before pronouncing me dead at 3:47 p.m. Rachel's sobs were worthy of an Academy Award. I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Cole, one of the paramedics said. We'll need to take your husband to the hospital for processing. Of course, Rachel whispered, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Whatever you need to do. They loaded my body into the ambulance. I caught a glimpse of Rachel through the small window. The moment she thought no one was looking, her expression of grief transformed into something else entirely. Relief. At the hospital, Maya and Dr. Kim helped me to a private room where I would stay hidden while my death was officially processed. Meanwhile, Maya monitored Rachel's activities through the surveillance equipment in our house. What we saw was nauseating. Within an hour of my supposed death, Rachel was on the phone with Daniel. It's done, she said, her voice bright with excitement. Ethan's dead. Rinse. Are you sure? Daniel asked. I watched them load his body into the ambulance. The doctor said it was cardiac arrest triggered by the oleander poisoning. Rachel laughed, actually laughed. I should feel guilty, but honestly, I just feel free. What about the kid? Ava's at school. I'll tell her when she gets home. She'll be upset for a while, but kids get over these things. Windshield. That evening, I watched through hidden cameras as Rachel broke the news to our daughter. Ava's heartbroken sobs nearly made me abandon the entire plan, but I forced myself to stay hidden. This was the only way to ensure she'd be safe from Rachel's future schemes. Daddy's gone to heaven, Rachel told Ava, stroking her hair with what looked like genuine tenderness. For a moment, I wondered if I'd misjudged my wife. Then I heard what she whispered when she thought Ava couldn't hear. Don't worry, sweetheart. Uncle Daniel will take good care of us now. The next few days were a masterclass in sociopathic behavior. Rachel played the grieving widow perfectly in public, accepting casseroles from neighbors and condolences from my coworkers. But in private, she and Daniel were already making plans. The life insurance payout should come through within a week, Rachel told Daniel during one of their secret phone calls. $500,000 plus the house. We can be in the Caribbean by Christmas. What about your job? I'll quit. Say I need time to grieve and can't bear staying in the same city where Ethan and I built our life together. Rachel's voice dripped with mock sentiment. Everyone will understand. But their celebration was premature. While they plotted their escape, I was plotting their destruction. Using Silas's hacking skills, I began systematically dismantling their lives. I started small, canceling Daniel's gym membership, redirecting his mail, signing him up for embarrassing mailing lists. Then I escalated. Daniel's prized BMW, a symbol of his success and masculinity, became my first major target. One night, dressed in dark clothes and a baseball cap, I slipped into the parking garage of his luxury condo building. Sugar in the gas tank was too cliché, so I got creative. I loosened his lug nuts just enough to make the car dangerous to drive, then slashed 3 tires and left a note on his windshield. Enjoy your ride to heck, courtesy of the dearly departed. The next morning, I watched from across the street as Daniel discovered the damage. His face went white as he read the note, and he immediately called Rachel. Someone knows, he said, his voice panicked. Ethan's dead, right? You saw the body? Of course he's dead, Rachel snapped. This is probably just some random vandalism. You're being paranoid. But Daniel's paranoia was just beginning. That afternoon, Rachel and Daniel met with the insurance agent to discuss the payout. I'd anticipated this meeting and had Silas plant listening devices in the insurance office. I'm sorry, Mrs. Cole, the agent said, but there seem to be some irregularities in your claim. What kind of irregularities? Rachel asked, and I could hear the tension in her voice. Well, for starters, your husband's medical records show a history of heart problems that weren't disclosed when he took out the policy. And there are some questions about the circumstances of his death. What questions? Daniel demanded. The FBI has been asking about Mr. Cole's recent case files. Apparently, he was investigating some pharmaceutical companies for Medicare fraud. Companies that might have had motive to silence him. I had to admire Maya's creativity. She'd planted just enough evidence to make it look like my death might have been a professional hit rather than domestic homicide. The insurance company would have to investigate thoroughly before paying out, buying us time to complete my revenge. How long will this take? Rachel asked. Could be months, maybe longer if the FBI investigation uncovers anything suspicious. I could practically hear Rachel's dreams of Caribbean beaches crumbling. But the best part was yet to come, because while Rachel and Daniel were focused on the insurance money, I was preparing to take away something much more valuable: their reputations. Living as a dead man was surprisingly liberating. I'd rented a small apartment across town using fake identification Silas had provided, and spent my days planning the systematic destruction of my wife and her lover. Maya visited regularly, bringing updates on the investigation and helping coordinate my revenge. She'd taken a leave of absence from the FBI, claiming she needed time to grieve her friend's death. In reality, she was having the time of her life helping me orchestrate the most elaborate payback scheme in recent memory. The insurance company is stalling beautifully, she reported during one of her visits. I may have mentioned to Agent Morrison that you were close to exposing a major pharmaceutical fraud ring. He's treating your death as potentially work-related, melting. And Rachel's reaction? Get more desperate by the day. She can't access your bank accounts because they're frozen pending the investigation. Daniel's getting nervous about being associated with her. Shal smiled grimly. Time to turn up the heat. Males. My next target was Rachel's professional reputation. As a pharmaceutical PR executive, her credibility was everything. One scandal could destroy years of career building. Silas had been monitoring Rachel's work email, and what we found was a goldmine of corporate malfeasance. Rachel had been covering up adverse pills reactions, bribing doctors to prescribe unnecessary medications, and falsifying clinical trial data. She was corrupt, even beyond the homicide plot. This is beautiful, Silas said as he compiled the evidence. Your wife isn't just someone who almost committed something unthinkable. She's a full-blown corporate criminal. Misuse. Can you trace this back to Daniel too? Thumbs. Oh, absolutely. He's been signing off on everything. They're both neck deep in this crap. Hell, I had Silas create an anonymous email account and began forwarding Rachel's incriminating emails to the FDA, the DEA, and several investigative journalists. But I didn't stop there. Rachel's work friends, the same women who'd laughed about my supposed boring personality, were about to learn some uncomfortable truths about their friend. I had Silas hack into the restaurant's security system and retrieve footage from Rachel's girls' night out. Then, I edited together a highlight reel of Rachel laughing about my health problems and joking about my life insurance policy. The video, along with transcripts of her most incriminating text messages with Daniel, went to everyone in Rachel's contact list. Her boss, her coworkers, her neighbors, her yoga instructor. Everyone would know exactly what kind of person Rachel Cole really was. The reaction was swift and devastating. Holy crap, Maya said, watching the fallout from her laptop. Rachel's office is in complete chaos. Her boss just called an emergency meeting. Through our surveillance, we watched Rachel receive phone call after phone call from horrified friends and colleagues. Her carefully constructed image as a devoted wife was crumbling in real time. But Daniel was having an even worse day. I'd saved my most creative revenge for him. Using Silas's hacking skills, I'd gained access to Daniel's work computer and discovered he'd been embezzling money from Meridian Pharmaceuticals for years, hiding it in offshore accounts. Instead of reporting this to authorities, I did something much more satisfying. I transferred all of Daniel's stolen money to various charities: the American Heart Association, the Poison Control Center, and a foundation for widows and orphans. Then I sent Daniel's wife, Patricia, a detailed accounting of his theft, his affair with Rachel, and their homicide plot, along with photographic evidence of their hotel meetings. Patricia Pierce was a formidable woman, a successful attorney with a reputation for ruthlessness in divorce court. When she learned about her husband's betrayal, her response was swift and merciless. Daniel's been served with divorce papers, Maya reported gleefully. His wife froze all their assets and filed a restraining order. He's been kicked out of their house and suspended from work pending an investigation. And Rachel? Powell. Fired. Her boss released a statement saying Meridian Pharmaceuticals has zero tolerance for employees who engage in criminal behavior. Within a week, both Rachel and Daniel had lost their jobs, their reputations, and their financial security. But I wasn't finished with them yet. The pièce de résistance would be my own funeral. Maya had arranged for a memorial service at a local funeral home, complete with flowers, eulogies, and a video tribute to my life. Rachel played her part perfectly, dressed in black and dabbing her eyes with tissues. What she didn't know was that I was there too, disguised as a member of the funeral home staff. I watched her accept condolences from my coworkers, my neighbors, and even some distant relatives who'd driven in for the service. Ethan was such a good man, one of my elderly aunts told Rachel. You were so lucky to have him. Relinquith. No, Rachel replied, her voice breaking with perfectly performed emotion. I just don't know how I'll go on without him. The real show was about to begin. During the eulogy, Maya stood up to speak about our friendship. But instead of delivering a touching tribute to my memory, she activated a hidden projector that displayed a compilation video on the wall behind the podium. The video started innocently enough. Photos of Rachel and me from our wedding, family vacations, birthdays. But then, it shifted to surveillance footage of Rachel and Daniel's hotel meetings, audio recordings of their homicide plot, and screenshots of their text messages mocking my death. The funeral home erupted in gasps and shocked whispers as the truth played out in high definition. Rachel's face went white as she realized she'd been exposed in front of everyone who mattered to her. "This is fake," she screamed, jumping to her feet. "Someone's trying to frame me." But the evidence was overwhelming. The audio recordings of her laughing about my life insurance policy, the video of her celebrating with Daniel just hours after my supposed death, the text messages planning my homicide. It was all there for everyone to see. Daniel, who'd been sitting in the back row, tried to slip out during the chaos, but Maya had anticipated this. She'd stationed several off-duty police officers at the exits, and they detained him as he attempted to flee. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya announced over the commotion, I present to you the people who were responsible for what happened to Ethan Cole, or at least tried to be. The crowd turned on Rachel like a pack of wolves. Her former friends, the same women who'd enabled her affair and laughed at her jokes about my boring personality, now looked at her with disgust and horror. "You're a monster," Jennifer Walsh said, tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this to Ethan? He loved you." "And what about Ava?" demanded Susan Chen. "Were you really going to let your daughter grow up thinking her father died of natural causes?" Rachel tried to defend herself, but her explanations sounded hollow and desperate. The evidence was too overwhelming, the betrayal too complete. As the crowd dispersed in shock and anger, Rachel found herself alone in the funeral home, abandoned by everyone who'd once called her friend. She sat in the front row, staring at the photos of our life together, finally understanding the magnitude of what she'd lost. But I still wasn't finished with her. The funeral video went viral within hours. Someone had recorded Maya's presentation on their phone, and by evening, Rachel's humiliation was trending on social media. The story had everything: homicide, betrayal, insurance fraud, and a dramatic public reveal that belonged in a Hollywood thriller. Local news stations picked up the story, then national outlets. Within 48 hours, Rachel Cole had become the most hated woman in America, the poster child for spousal betrayal and greed. "Poison Peddle Butcher exposed at husband's funeral," read the headline in the Washington Post. "Wife's homicide plot revealed in shocking video evidence." I watched the coverage from my hidden apartment, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. But the media attention was just the beginning of Rachel's problems. The FBI had officially reopened my case, and Agent Morrison was treating it as an attempted homicide investigation. Rachel and Daniel were both brought in for questioning, their alibis falling apart under scrutiny. "We have enough evidence to charge them both," Maya told me during one of her visits. "The text messages, the surveillance footage, the testimony from the flower shop owner who remembers Rachel asking about oleander toxicity. It's an airtight case." "What about the insurance money?" "Frozen indefinitely. The company won't pay out until the criminal case is resolved, and even then, there's a clause preventing beneficiaries from collecting if they're convicted of causing the insured's death." Rachel's financial situation was becoming desperate. Without the insurance payout or her job, she couldn't afford the mortgage on our house. The media attention had made her unemployable in the pharmaceutical industry, and her legal fees were mounting. But her biggest problem was yet to come. I'd been saving the most damaging evidence for last. Proof that Rachel had been planning to abandon our daughter after my death. Using Silas's skills, I'd recovered deleted emails between Rachel and several boarding schools, inquiring about immediate enrollment for Ava. The messages made it clear that Rachel viewed our daughter as an inconvenience to her new life with Daniel. These emails, along with recordings of Rachel's conversations about sending Ava away, went to Child Protective Services and Family Court. Within days, Rachel's custody of Ava was suspended, pending a full investigation. My daughter was placed with my sister Karen, a loving woman who'd always been suspicious of Rachel's motives. Ava was devastated by my supposed death, but at least she was safe from her mother's schemes. The final blow came when Daniel, facing his own criminal charges and financial ruin, decided to save himself by cooperating with prosecutors. He provided detailed testimony about the homicide plot, admitting that Rachel had been the mastermind and he'd been a reluctant participant. "She said it would look like an accident," Daniel told investigators, according to Maya's sources in the FBI. Rachel researched everything: the oleander toxicity, the insurance policies, even how to fake grief counseling sessions to look like a devoted widow. Daniel's betrayal of Rachel was the ultimate irony. The woman who'd betrayed her husband was now being betrayed by her lover, abandoned and alone, just as she'd planned to leave me. But I had one final surprise for both of them. On a rainy Thursday evening, exactly 1 month after my supposed death, Rachel returned to our house to pack her remaining belongings. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings, and she had to be out by the weekend. What she didn't know was that I was already there, waiting in the shadows of the home we'd shared for 15 years. I'd been planning this confrontation since the day I faked my death, and now it was time to reveal myself to the woman who'd tried to homicide me. Rachel entered through the front door, looking haggard and defeated. The stress of the past month had aged her years. Her blonde hair was unwashed and stringy, her designer clothes wrinkled and stained. The confident, beautiful woman who'd laughed about my boring personality was gone, replaced by a desperate stranger. She moved through the house mechanically, packing photos and personal items into cardboard boxes. When she reached our bedroom, she sat on the bed and began to cry. Real tears this time, not the performance she'd given at my funeral. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry." That's when I stepped out of the closet. "Sorry for what, Rachel? Sorry you tried to end me, or sorry you got caught?" Rachel screamed and fell backward off the bed, scrambling away from me like I was a ghost. In a way, I suppose I was. "You're dead," she gasped. "I saw them take your body away." What I wanted you to see. I stepped into the light, and Rachel's face went white as she realized the truth. "Surprise, darling. Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated." "But the hospital. The doctor said what I want." I paid her to say. Just like the paramedics, the funeral director, and everyone else who helped me fake my own death. I sat down in the chair across from our bed, the same chair where I used to read while Rachel got ready for her secret meetings with Daniel. "Did you really think you could homicide an FBI agent and get away with it?" Rachel's shock was giving way to anger. "You bastard! Do you have any idea what you've put me through? I lost my job, my friends, my reputation, therapists. You lost your job because you're a criminal. You lost your friends because they discovered what kind of person you really are. And you lost your reputation because you tried to homicide your husband for insurance money." I leaned forward, my voice cold. "Everything that's happened to you is a direct consequence of your own actions." "What do you want?" Rachel demanded. "I want you to understand what you've lost. Not just the money or the career or the public humiliation, though those are nice bonuses. I want you to understand that you've lost the one person who actually loved you, despite all your flaws." Rachel's face crumpled. "I never meant for it to go this far. The affair with Daniel, it just happened. And then when he started talking about being together permanently, I got caught up in the fantasy. So you decided to end me. I thought it would be quick, painless. You'd never know what happened." She was crying again, but these tears seemed genuine. "I told myself you'd be better off dead than married to someone who didn't love you anymore." "How noble of you. And Ava? Was she better off without a father?" Rachel's face went white. "I love Ava. I would never hurt her." "You were planning to send her to boarding school so you and Daniel could play house without any inconvenient reminders of your previous life." I pulled out my phone and played one of her recorded conversations. "These are your words, Rachel. The kid will be fine. We'll send her to boarding school. More time for us." I was confused, overwhelmed. I wasn't thinking clearly. "You were thinking clearly enough to research oleander toxicity for 6 months. You were thinking clearly enough to increase my life insurance policy without telling me. You were thinking clearly enough to plan every detail of my homicide." Rachel slumped against the wall, defeated. "What happens now? Are you going to have me arrested?" "Oh, Rachel, you're already under investigation for attempted homicide. The FBI has enough evidence to put you away for 20 years. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where we'd raised our daughter. "But prison would be too easy. You'd become a victim, a woman who made a terrible mistake because she was manipulated by her older, more powerful boss. Then what do you want?" I turned back to face her. "I want you to live with the consequences of your choices. You wanted me dead so you could start a new life? Well, congratulations. Your old life is completely destroyed, and you get to start over with nothing." "Ethan, please. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but you're right. You don't deserve forgiveness. You don't deserve a second chance, and you certainly don't deserve my mercy." I walked toward the door, then paused. "But I'm going to give you something anyway. I'm going to give you the truth." "What truth?" "The truth is that despite everything you've done, the affair, the homicide plot, the plan to abandon our daughter, part of me still loves the woman I married 15 years ago. The woman who laughed at my jokes, who cried during sad movies, who held my hand during her father's funeral. I looked at her one last time. That woman died long before you tried to end me. What's left is just a stranger wearing her face. I left Rachel sitting on the floor of our bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of the life she'd destroyed. As I walked out of the house for the last time, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The next morning brought news that Daniel had been found dead in his hotel room, apparently having taken his own life. He'd left behind a detailed confession, taking full responsibility for the homicide plot and exonerating Rachel of any wrongdoing. Even in death, Daniel was trying to save the woman he'd helped destroy. But his final act of devotion was too little, too late. The evidence against Rachel was overwhelming, and Daniel's confession was clearly the desperate act of a man trying to protect his lover from the consequences of their shared crimes. Maya called me with the news while I was having coffee in my hidden apartment. "Daniel's dead," she said without preamble. Hotel maid found him this morning with an empty bottle of sleeping pills and a note explaining everything. What did the note say? That he manipulated Rachel into the homicide plot, that she was an innocent victim of his schemes, and that he couldn't live with the guilt of destroying her life. Maya's voice was skeptical. "It's BS, of course. We have recordings of Rachel planning your homicide months before Daniel got seriously involved." "How's Rachel taking it?" "Publicly, she's devastated by the loss of her dear friend and colleague. Privately, she's probably relieved that her co-conspirator can't testify against her anymore. Relinquix. But Rachel's relief would be short-lived. Daniel's death had generated even more media attention, and public opinion was turning increasingly hostile toward the poison peddle butcher who'd driven her lover to take his own life. The FBI's investigation was also intensifying. Agent Morrison had assembled a task force to examine every aspect of Rachel's life, and what they were finding painted a picture of a woman who'd been planning my homicide for far longer than anyone had realized. "We found evidence that Rachel had been researching your death for over a year," Maya told me during one of our meetings. "Internet searches for life insurance policies, untraceable poisons, and how to fake grief. She even bought books on widow psychology to perfect her performance." "A year?" I was stunned. "She was planning this since before the affair with Daniel?" "Looks like it. Daniel might have been the catalyst, but Rachel was already thinking about ending you long before they got together. The revelation was devastating. My marriage hadn't just died recently. It had been dead for years, kept alive only by Rachel's need to maintain appearances while she planned my demise. But there was one more surprise waiting for me. 3 days after Daniel's death, Rachel called Maya and asked to meet. She claimed she had information about my case that could help the investigation. Maya agreed to the meeting, but insisted it take place at FBI headquarters, with full recording equipment. What Rachel revealed during that session changed everything I thought I knew about my wife's motivations. "I want to make a deal," Rachel said, sitting across from Maya in an interrogation room. "I'll confess to everything, the affair, the homicide plot, the insurance fraud, but I want immunity from prosecution." "In exchange for what?" Maya asked. "Information about a much bigger crime. Ethan wasn't my first husband, and he wouldn't have been my first victim." Maya's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "My first husband, Michael, died in a car accident 7 years before I met Ethan. At least, that's what everyone believed." Rachel's voice was calm, almost casual, but Michael's death wasn't an accident. I cut his brake lines after increasing his life insurance policy, just like I did with Ethan. "You're lying. Check the records. Michael Chen died in Riverside, California, 2010. Single car accident on a winding mountain road. His widow, that would be me, collected $300,000 in life insurance money and moved across the country to start fresh." Rachel smiled coldly. "That's how I had the down payment for the house Ethan and I bought in D.C. Maya was recording everything, but she needed more details. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired of running. Tired of pretending to be someone I'm not." Rachel leaned back in her chair. "I've been planning and executing homicides for over a decade, and I'm actually quite good at it. Ethan was just unlucky enough to figure out my methods." "And Daniel?" "Daniel was a useful idiot. He thought he was manipulating me into ending Ethan, but I was already planning to do it anyway. The affair just gave me better cover. Rachel's expression hardened. When he started getting cold feet and talking about confessing, I knew he had to go. You ended Daniel? I convinced him to end himself. Told him it was the only way to save me from prosecution, that his sacrifice would make him a romantic hero instead of a co-conspirator. Rachel laughed bitterly. Men are so predictable. They all want to be the hero of their own story. Maya felt sick. How many others? Just Michael and Daniel. Ethan would have been number 3 if he hadn't been smarter than I gave him credit for. Rachel looked directly into the camera. I know you're watching this, Ethan. I know you're not really dead. And I want you to know that I respect what you did. You beat me at my own game. The confession was everything the FBI needed to charge Rachel with multiple homicides. But it also revealed something else. Rachel wasn't just a desperate housewife who'd made a terrible mistake. She was a serial butcher who'd been perfecting her methods for years. She's a sociopath, Dr. Kim told me after reviewing the confession video. Complete lack of empathy, grandiose sense of self-worth, and a pattern of manipulating others for personal gain. You're lucky to be alive. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt hollow, like everything I'd believed about my life had been a lie. The woman I'd loved, the mother of my child, was a heartless manipulator who'd been planning my death since the day we met. The final confrontation came a week later, when Rachel was formally arrested and charged with 3 counts of homicide: Michael, Daniel, and the attempted homicide of me. As she was led away in handcuffs, she looked directly at the news cameras and smiled. I regret nothing, she said, except getting caught. The trial lasted 6 months and was covered extensively by national media. Rachel's defense team tried to paint her as a victim of misuse and manipulation, but the evidence was too overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding her guilty on all counts. Rachel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As I sat in the courtroom listening to the judge read the sentence, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice had been served, but it couldn't undo the damage Rachel had caused. My daughter would grow up knowing her mother was a butcher. My faith in love and marriage had been shattered beyond repair, but I was alive, and that was something. After the sentencing, I met with Maya outside the courthouse. The media circus was finally winding down, and I could begin the process of reclaiming my life. What happens now? Maya asked. Now I go back to being Ethan Cole, forensic accountant and single father. I looked up at the gray sky, feeling rain beginning to fall. I have a daughter to raise and a life to rebuild. Any regrets about the way you handled this? I thought about the question for a long moment. I could have turned Rachel in the moment I discovered her plot. Let the FBI arrest her and Daniel, testified at their trial, and moved on with my life. It would have been simpler, cleaner, more by the book. But it wouldn't have been justice. Rachel would have gotten a lighter sentence. Daniel would have painted himself as the victim of her manipulation, and they both would have been out of prison in 10 or 15 years. I smiled grimly. This way, Rachel will spend the rest of her life paying for what she did. And Daniel, well, he made his own choice. Relinquith? You don't feel guilty about Daniel taking his own life? Daniel was a grown man who chose to participate in a homicide plot. When the consequences became real, he took the coward's way out rather than face them. I shrugged. I didn't end Daniel Pierce. His own guilt and cowardice ended him. Maya nodded, understanding. What about Ava? How do you explain all this to a 10-year-old? Carefully, honestly. She deserves to know the truth about her mother, but she also deserves to have a normal childhood. I paused. My sister Karen has been wonderful with her. Ava's in therapy, doing well in school, making friends. Kids are resilient. And you? Are you resilient? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm alive, Maya. After everything Rachel put me through, that's resilient enough. As I walked away from the courthouse, I thought about the man I'd been 6 months earlier. Naive, trusting, convinced that my biggest problem was a boring marriage. That man was gone, ended as surely as if Rachel's oleander plot had succeeded. In his place was someone harder, more cynical, but also more honest about the darkness that could lurk in the human heart. I'd learned that love could be faked, that trust could be twisted and used against you, and that the person sleeping next to you could be planning your homicide. But I'd also learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, capable of fighting back against impossible odds and emerging victorious. The rain was falling harder now, washing the courthouse steps clean. I pulled my coat tighter and walked toward my car, where my daughter was waiting with her aunt. Ava had been through heck, but she was safe now, surrounded by people who truly loved her. As for me, I had work to do. The FBI had offered me a promotion and a transfer to the white-collar crime division. Apparently, my experience with Rachel had given me unique insights into the criminal mind that could be valuable in future investigations. I'd accepted the position. After all, I'd discovered I had a talent for catching butchers. And if there were other Rachel Coles out there, other smiling sociopaths planning their spouses' deaths for insurance money, I'd be ready for them. The rain continued to fall as I drove home, washing away the last traces of the man I used to be. In the rearview mirror, I could see the courthouse growing smaller, along with the chapter of my life that had ended there. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. I was 42 years old, starting over with nothing but my daughter's love and my own hard-won wisdom. It was enough.